All right, we're going to be starting chapter 11, talking about circles. Specifically today, we're looking at circumference and then how to use circumference to find arc length. Okay, so if you haven't grabbed your notes already, make sure you grab a new set of notes for chapter 11. First, we're going to talk about circumference of a circle, and then we'll move on to arc length. So the circumference of a circle is the distance around a circle. So it's basically the same thing as perimeter, but remember, for a circle, we call it circumference instead of perimeter. The ratio of the circumference to the diameter is the value pi. So circumference divided by diameter is the value for pi, which, just as a reminder, pi, we use the rounded number, the rounded decimal, 3.14. So given to you kind of in this little bubble is the formula for circumference, which is pi times diameter. Also, the other formula you could use is 2 pi r. This is when you're given the radius, right? Which this works because we know that the radius is 2 times the radius is equal to the diameter, right? The diameter is twice the radius. So that's why both formulas will work. You can use whichever formula you want, depending on if it gives you diameter or radius. Okay, so we're going to walk through a few examples. I know this stuff you guys have seen. It's just probably been a while. So example 1 asks you to find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 9 centimeters. So I would use the formula 2 times pi times radius. Then all you have to do is plug in the number for your radius, which is 9. So 2 times pi times 9. Now, it will ask you, sometimes it'll ask for an exact answer, which is where you leave pi as part of your answer. Other times it will ask you for a rounded decimal. So an exact answer here, you would just multiply the two numbers together, which would give you 18 pi. So this is your exact answer. Then if it wants a rounded answer, you would type in your calculator 18 times pi, and you would get 56.55. Right, so this would be a rounded answer. On most of these problems, I'll be giving you both, an exact answer and a rounded answer. Okay, so same idea on example 2. It says find the circumference of the circle with a diameter of 26 inches. So here you can just use circumference is equal to pi times diameter, which all we do is multiply pi times our diameter, which is 26. Now, to write it correctly, we're always going to put the number first and then pi second. So again, this is our exact answer here, 26 pi. And then if we want a rounded answer, we type in our calculator 26 times pi, and we would get 81.68, or approximately 81.68, which is a rounded answer. Okay, example 3 asks you to find the radius of a circle with a circumference of 17 feet. So again, I would always use whatever formula it's asking you for. So if it asks for radius, I would use 2 pi r. Okay, and then we plug in what we know, which this time it tells us the circumference, which is c, right, is 17. So I would say 17 is equal to 2 times pi times r, right? Well, what are we trying to solve for? We're trying to solve for radius, so I would divide by 2 pi, because that's what I don't need on this side. Divide by 2 pi. Okay, then you have two choices on how you can do this. You can divide first, or you can type in your calculator 17 divided by, and then just immediately hit 2 pi, and it should take you to your answer. You might have to put that in parentheses, though. I would probably do 17 divided by parentheses 2 pi. I think that will get you to your right answer, which it does. So make sure you put 2 pi in parentheses, and we get our radius is about 2.7 feet. If you don't put 2 pi in parentheses, it will probably give you it won't give you a correct answer. So make sure you use parentheses around 2 pi. Now, also as a reminder, the other thing you could do is divide by pi first, and that would give you your diameter, and then you could take half of that to get your radius as well. Either way will always work. Okay, lastly, on this page, it says a car has a diameter of 28 inches. How many revolutions does the tire make while traveling 500 feet? So the first thing we need to do is find the circumference, because that would be the distance around, which would give you 1 revolution. So circumference is equal to 28 pi, right? Anytime it gives you diameter, you can just put that straight with pi, and you already have your circumference, okay? Now, I would go ahead and type 28 pi in my calculator, and we're going to get that the circumference is about 88 inches. Now, here's where you have to be careful with these type of problems, right? It says when traveling 500 feet. Well, if my other dimension is in inches, we need 500 feet to also be in inches. So, just as a reminder, 12 inches in a foot, so we're going to take 500, multiply it by 12, and we're going to get 6,000 inches. So I'm traveling 6,000 inches, and every 88 inches is 1 rotation. So to find how many rotations, we just divide by how many inches are in 1, and 6,000 divided by 68 is going to give you, 6,000 divided by 88 is going to give you about 68 revolutions. All right. Again, I feel like this first page you guys are pretty used to because we've seen circumference before. Now, when we look at our second page, we are going to start talking about arc length, which is not overly difficult. We just haven't necessarily seen it other than talking about the arc length in the last chapter, chapter 10. So an arc length is a portion of a circle. You can use the measure of the arc, which just as a reminder is the same as the central angle. Right? So whatever this angle is here is going to be the same measure as your arc length. Okay, so central angle here on the inside, arc length here on the outside. Now, it gives you the formula, right? The arc length is found by taking the measure of angle AB, which this is always in degrees, divided by 360, which is the total, and then we just multiply by 2 pi r, which we just talked about. 2 pi r is the formula for circumference. Right? Another reason we find that first. Now, just so you, side note before you move on, the arc length is always going to be, it's a fraction of the circumference. Which should make sense, right? Because if circumference is all the way around and then we're just taking a portion of that, it's a fraction of our circumference, okay? So let's go through, we're going to go through 4 examples real quick on how to find that. The first 2 ask you to find the indicated measure. We want the arc length of AB. So we take whatever our degree measure is, that here would be 60, and we always put it over 360, the total degrees for a circle. And then we're just going to multiply by 2 pi r. So here we have 2 times pi times my radius of this circle is 8. Now, when we multiply by this, it's almost like you put this over 1, right? Since we have 2 fractions. When you do that, you multiply the top, then you multiply the bottom. So in your calculator, we're going to do 60 times 2 times 8. and we're going to get 960, and then remember we still have that pi on the top, all over 360 times 1 would give us 360. Now, we're going to give two answers, right? Like we talked about earlier, an exact answer, which leaves pi, and then a rounded answer as well, okay? Now, you could type in your calculator, 960, use your fraction button to help you simplify if you're unsure, which would give you, it's going to give you a mixed number, 2 2/3. 2 2/3 simplifies to 8 over 3. So we get 8 pi over 3, which is our exact answer. Then if we want to convert that to a decimal, we're going to do 8 pi and then divide that by 3. You should get, it's about 8.4 is your rounded answer. Remember, you can use your calculator to help you with a lot of things, but just be careful on how you type that in, okay? All right, same thing on example 2. Example 2 asks you to find the length of PQ. That's this part here, right? So just like last time, we're going to take that central angle measure, which is 75, and put that over 360, and then multiply pi 2 times pi times the radius, okay? So, we're going to multiply by 2 times pi. Now be careful here. It gives you the whole diameter. The whole diameter is 9. Half of 9 is going to be 4.5. Okay, so same as last time. We're going to type in our calculator. 75 times 2 times 4.5. That should give us 675 pi. And we leave that over 360. Okay, again, as an exact answer, we're going to do 675 as a fraction over 360, and we're going to simplify that. You should get 15 pi over 8. Right, this is our exact answer. Then, just as a reminder, if we want to change to decimal, we do 15 pi, hit equals, divide that by 8, and we should get 5.9 yards for our rounded answer. So both answers are technically the same, right? One's an exact answer, one is a rounded answer. All right, last two examples are going to give you the arc length, right? Notice out here next to the arc, we have the length, which is 4.19, and it's wanting us to find the circumference of circle Z. So really, we can use the formula we just used to help us find the radius, and then as soon as I have the radius, I can solve for circumference, okay? All right. Set up the same way. Our interior angle is 40, so we're going to start with 40, divide it by 360, and we're multiplying that by 2 pi r, right? This time we don't know the radius. So 40 times 2 pi r, and then we're going to set this equal to whatever our arc length is here, okay, which is 4.19. So last time we had this number, we solved this whole side to find our answer. This time we're solving to find what r is. Now, here's the deal. Let me just remind you of one thing. If I'm solving for circumference, isn't circumference equal to 2 pi r? Yes. So if that's true, all I have to do is get rid of this 40 over 360. Now, if you remember, we can always multiply by the reciprocal. So all you have to do here is multiply both sides by 360 over 40, because then those two would cancel, these two would cancel. So I multiply the left side by 360 over 40. And then I'll have 2 pi r is equal to my answer, which is the circumference, okay? So in your calculator, we're going to do 4.19 times, and put in parentheses, 360 divided by 40. Okay, and you should get an answer of 37.71, which means my circumference is 37.71 inches. We're going to do one more just to remind you of how to solve for that. Now, this one is a little bit different because instead of asking for the circumference, it is asking you to solve for the measure of angle RS. Now, normally we put that over 360, so if we don't know it, we can call it anything you want. Here we're going to call it x. So I'm going to say x over 360 times 2 times pi times my radius, which is 15.28, has to equal my arc length, which is given to us 44. Now, I would do the same thing here. I would multiply everything on top down to a single answer, right, other than x. So really just 15.28 times 2, which is going to give you 30.56 pi, and then we still have that x on top, all over 360, equal to 44. Now, I would probably do it in 2 steps. I would multiply both sides here by 360. So that would give me 30.56 pi times x is equal to 44 times 360, 15,840. And then to get x by itself, I would just divide by 30.56 pi on both sides. Now, just as a reminder, when you type in your calculator, I would do 15,840 divided by parentheses 30.56 pi to lead you to your right answer. And since it's degrees, we're going to round to the nearest whole number, 165 degrees. Okay, so just be careful as you go through those. You can use your notes to help you. We do have a few problems that you're practicing in the book today. You're going to be on page 578. We're just doing numbers 1 through 7 and 41.